Hi, how's everyone out there doing? This is Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager Life is a Project and The Consummate Communicator. Both are available for Kindle download all day long. And I am here with the amazing Kaija Lane, who sent me her t shirt. And this is a leadership nugget t shirt. It is absolutely phenomenal. And Kaija has written two books. And so, Kaija, could you just give us a really kind of high level overview of both your books? And they're similar but also very different.
Yes, yes. So first of all, thank you for having me, Amy. I think this is really super what you have put together for us authors, amazing authors. I listened to a couple of them earlier today. So again, thank you so much. My two books that I wrote that I think I also shared with you, I believe. I'm going to try to do this whole camera thing. This is really interesting, right? Free to Dance, which is my memoir on suicide loss, and then Changing the Dance, Leadership Nuggets for Dance Ministry Leaders. These two great books were written at the same time, so I kind of call them twins, but not identical, right? Because the topics are different, but yet the similarity is this metaphor of dance, which is very important to me and my life and my lifestyle. I am an artist by nature. I love to dance as one of my creative artist pieces. And so I wrote both Changing the Dance, Leadership Nuggets for Dance Ministry Leaders, and Free to Dance, a suicide survivor's memoir, back in 2016, actually, was when they were both published, written and published and released. So the first, again, Free to Dance, is a story of me as a survivor of suicide loss. I lost my husband to suicide, death by suicide, back in 2008. So this particular story is my journey through the help, healing, and hope process, is what I kind of define it as. And it was and still is, right? Because it's still a journey, it's still a process. And now it has been, I think, just over 12 years, actually, this month. Just dawned on me, October. But still, nonetheless, it's just a helpful resource and tool for those who have lost someone due to suicide. Simple things are just things that we normally don't think of, right? In losing a loved one. And then the other book is just a manual or a tool for leaders who are in this ministry perspective of the creative arts. So that gives you a little bit about the two books.
So first of all, Kaija, it's not just anything. It is amazing. You are so accomplished and so humble. Plus, your t-shirt yourself is another one of the Leadership Nuggets t-shirts, celebrating leadership.
Yay.
And I mean, super amazing the work you're doing and as a creative. And this event is really this international virtual book festival with authors helping authors like able to reach out and connect in this virtual environment, and also connect with readers, because people, are in their houses now. One of the things I encourage people to do is, people are like, I don't have anything to do. I'm like, what's the last book you read? And this is a complete multi-genre event. There are all kinds of different books, everything from like, your kind of thriller books with killer addiction to later on we're going to have Leo Kane, who is a young adult book. And then one of my very favorites, our last author of the day, Charisse, did her book called Fruititudes, and it's a children's book. So absolutely amazing, phenomenal authors. Kaija, I'm going to ask you some tough questions today. Sure. And I know that you can take it. We've worked together and been together now for years. And I know that you are mentally and emotionally just one of the strongest women that I have ever been around. And it's just phenomenal to have you here on this broadcast. And one of the things that I was hoping you could talk a little bit about is this concept that so often people talk about suicide prevention. And don't get me wrong, the first goal is to prevent it. Yes. But there's very, very few people out there who talk about what is it like to be a survivor. Yeah. And I think that you're putting your memoir out there, and the bravery of that is tremendous. And you've really been able to help so many people, because this is something that people don't talk about very much. And so could you share a bit about your journey experience with both writing the book and what's happened since then?
Oh, wow. I thank you for how you laid that out, Amy. That is so, I'm grateful for that. And yes, so the writing of the book, one thing I like to tell folks is that, and I think some of your writers and authors have shared this, that writing doesn't just start today. It's something that is within all of us, right? We all have the ability and the knowledge, but it's also this jotting down notes or writing down interests or writing down your thoughts for the day, right? That's usually how it starts. Of course, some of us authors, we're profound in doing it. But for me, when I first lost my husband, within that first week, someone had whispered in my ear, write down your thoughts, because there was a time where I really couldn't talk about what I was feeling and all that I was going through. But the individual, I'll never forget her. She whispered in my ear, I want to say within that first couple of days of my loss, and she said, start writing. And that is really how the book developed, because I wrote for every day. I wrote every thought, every idea, every fear. Something as simple as I couldn't find my car one particular day when I came out of the mall. The anxiety that built up inside of me, and the feelings that I was feeling at that moment, and missing my husband, and identifying the fact of what he used to tell me, when you go to the mall, this is what you need to do, right? So writing all of that down, I think in that particular instant, I turned it into a poem. And that is how Free to Dance started for me. It started as this ability to write everything down of what I was feeling, my thoughts, my ideas, and then also the process of what I went through to begin the healing phase for me. And when you're in that writing mode and you don't know why you're writing, you're just jotting down your thoughts, it turns into this creative space as well. So I think when I finally picked up my binder of writings, maybe 6 years after my husband's initial loss, it was about this thick, a white binder, because I would write, I would make copies of it, and I would put it in this binder, never to want to see it again. And so that didn't happen. I kept this white binder with me, and finally in 2008, I sat down, and it was because of the loss of someone in our community. Their daughter had died by suicide. I completely got convicted immediately, and God said, the timing is now, write the book. And so it happened in September. I'll never forget. I came back home and I gathered all of that white binder, right, that I had tucked away. And I began to start piecing together the story, how I wanted the story to be told, what fairness I wanted to give the characters in the story. And I reached out to a publisher, and I got to give her a shout out, right? I think we all should give our publishers a shout out, and those who help us write. Her name is Rakesha Pittman, and she's out of Texas. And she specifically became my midwife for writing. She helped me to figure things out and organizing and shaping it. And so that pretty much was the process for this particular book. But at the same time, I was writing Changing the Dance, because I was in the church doing worship ministry, leading folks, leading teams, and that writing was also developing as well. So two different genres, of course, but yet still, as I call them, twins, birthed and born at the same time. But yet I still also had to have two different types of editors, right? One editing for my voice, the other editing for ministry, so to speak. And so that within itself is a whole nother process. But I think I answered your question to some degree. I got there, yeah?
I think, and the thing is, though, is you really put it well in the sense of, when so often people talk about suicide prevention, and they talk about, well, they committed suicide, but you phrased it like you said about your husband, and you said about this young girl. It's like a death by suicide. And when you look at that, there's survivors, there's the people who are left behind. And we talk about the family where somebody dies from cancer, and we talk about families where somebody dies in a car accident, or really tragic things like when babies die in SIDS. But what we don't talk about is those who are left behind from somebody who has a death by suicide. and
Yes.
that these people don't have really good support groups and ways to be comforted. So can you share a bit more about how you've been able to share discomfort of your memoir with others?
Yes. One thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to tell the story in such a way that it would be healing for others, right? When I lost my husband originally, I'm a very private person. We were very private as couples. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to look to. I didn't know who to trust. I was, still serving because both of us were serving in the military at the time. And I had a beautiful group and host of family and friends, but still it was different, right? So I think the purpose for the book was to kind of lay out things that we normally just don't think of, like simple things like what do you do with your loved one's clothing? How do you process their state of affairs? How do you get through communicating with family? And it's specifically important for survivors of suicide. Why? Because there's such a stigma associated how to navigate through this space. I think it's fair to talk about statistics, if I could share just a little
Oh,
bit of that.
please.
But for every one death by suicide, we're looking at, forgive me if my numbers are wrong, but I think it's 130 or 178. I think I should know this by heart because I just talked about this. But nonetheless, it's 100 plus people that are affected by that one death. Right. So when you think about that, it starts with a smaller nucleus and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. For example, now I know you know me, therefore you have and can identify with someone who has lost someone due to suicide. But the significance about that is that how do you answer the tough questions? How do you extend your hand to help others? And why is it so difficult to talk about it? Right? What makes it so different from someone dying by a loved one dying by, say, cancer or age, after a while, maturity? I think what makes it so different is because we don't understand the why. And I think in my book, I kind of lay out that search for wanting to know why, but being respectful and being okay with not knowing why, right? And I think that was just specifically connected to my faith. And coming to a conclusion that in that not understanding why, there's still healing in that process. And I think that's what my book tries to lay out for survivors. And particularly for me, if I know of someone, and this is for your audience, if I know of someone or someone says to me, hey, Kaija, so-and-so recently lost a loved one due to suicide, I gift them the book. I don't ask any questions. I'm not concerned about his or her faith. I simply get their address and just send it as a gift because there's so many nuggets throughout the book that can help navigate through those spaces of just getting through a day.
I think that's such an important thing, Kaija. And for the people who are out there, first and foremost, COVID is a difficult time for people in so many ways. And suicide rates have increased. And, the first goal is let's prevent these suicides. Let's do what we can, connect to each other. Having this authors event is just as much as about connecting and the friendship and the camaraderie as it is about the books themselves and being with these other authors. But if you can't prevent it, if you are out there and you've experienced this in your life, then what Kaija has offered is a firsthand account of what you might be going through right now. And I do encourage you to reach out to Kaija and to take a look at this because there's so few resources for those who are impacted in this. And Kaija, I knew I was going to start tearing up in this session. And I said, this is such an important thing. No, I don't want to avoid it. And I think that that's the key is so many times we avoid this topic of suicide. Yes. And instead you went and it took you years to confront and to get your message out. But I think such a strong, powerful message. And then you mentioned at the same time, you embraced what was a very dark journey that led to a very light place. And this led to this brightness that comes out in your other book. And can you talk about that book a bit?
Yeah, Changing the Dance. It's leadership nuggets for dance ministry leaders. Now, I will say that it's just not for dance ministry leaders. Often I've had people call me and say, hey, I like your book. I found it. I saw it. and I want to purchase it because the nuggets in there pertain to me as a leader overall. But the beautiful thing about this book, it started as just that, a conversation about what a nugget is, right? What it is and what it provides. Why a nugget? I think, Webster defines this nugget as this valuable piece of something, right? That has a purpose and intent, right? And that's what it is. That's what the whole branding for me has been, these leadership nuggets that provide a quick thought, an idea of something that one would never think of. And the thing about this particular book is that I wanted it to be for leaders, particularly in the creative arts, for me, movement ministry leaders in the church, because a lot of times we just don't know what we don't know, right? The difference between you and I, we know the difference between a leader and a manager, right? Because we're working and studying in this whole field, but being able to share with what that is, what the responsibilities are, and how to navigate through this cumbersome space of leading others through ministry. And so it is also a topic that's not shared and talk about that much, particularly in the church, because we don't see, say, worship, right, and ministry, worship ministry and the arts as something that needs leadership through. And in all actuality, we're discovering the creative leadership perspective, the artist who, has imagination, influence, innovation. We're seeing how important artists are used and needed just in our regular lives as well, on our job and our government experiences. And so that's what this particular book was focused on, helping the dance ministry leader, the worship leader, the music ministry leader to navigate through what leadership is defined for us, how we feel about it.
So, Kaija, you have had so many good points, and I just want to say I am so proud and just grateful to have you as a friend and as somebody who I met by coincidence, and then who I found out had so many other intersections into my life, as you're aware.
Yeah.
And so what's been really fascinating with my journey with Kaija is Kaija and I met through going to residency for a PhD program the very first time. And we were like, okay, we're crazy. We're going to start this PhD. And then we keep intersecting. And the thing about Kaija that just is so impressive right now, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about this concept, is you're working on your PhD, you have a day job in the federal government, you have your books and your public speaking, you just did a TEDx talk, you've done all these amazing things, and you're balancing them all right now during COVID. And what is your advice to people who are trying to just balance all these myriad of things?
Yeah, wow. I was with some Christian family members in July down in Georgia. I made the trip and I escaped the Northeast to get down to Georgia to be with some friends this past summer. And my spiritual father was preaching on what is in your hands, right, during this time of COVID. And, I left that worship service thinking that we have to use this time with our hands. What are we going to develop, especially as artists? This isolation, this being away and apart from each other, and then this massive environment of video and talking and communicating and not touching and feeling and connecting, it's difficult. It's something we're not used to. So how can I turn this around and use it for the benefit of the glory of God, right? And so my focus has been on creating everything that I can, right? Because I believe COVID's going to end soon. I think we're all going to go back to work. It may not be the normal way. It will be different. But when we go back, it's going to be just as intense as it was prior to. So what we have now, this time in our loneliness and isolation, is the time to really work hard on those things that you put on that shelf. That white binder that you put away on the shelf to think, I'll write that book later, is the time now to pull that white binder down and really blow it off and really work and try to figure out how to lay out your book. Or that backyard that you decided that you weren't gonna put any flowers or plants in. Fall is a beautiful time to start planting, right? Get the seed in the ground, because come spring, you're going to have a beautiful yard. I know you're well versed in that, Amy, because you're doing all of the crafty things. But I think as authors, this is the season to really write as much as you can and then save it up so that you can produce yet another baby. I'm working on the third book, and my third book is Leadership Nuggets for a Generation of Leaders. So I'm speaking to the next generation of leaders with these over 200 different nuggets, right? So that right now is in the process of being, baked in the oven with the publisher. So I think that's really my give back to you for this one, for other authors and others who are watching, is that now's the time to really be very active with your hands. Write, create, give, do now in order to reap your harvest come post-COVID.
And another really great thing about that, Kaija, is it's not just the time to write, but it's also the time to read. So often I've read different posts where people are like, I'm binge watching something of low value. And what I encourage is read. And even if you're reading a book that you're going to watch in the same like movie for, reading that book stimulates different parts of your brain, and reading just has so much value. And there's these PBS commercials I keep seeing lately, and it was all about like read to your children and the importance that if you start people reading young, how it actually gives them so much more opportunity later on in life.
Yes. The reading aspect of this whole creative literature space we're in is key. I find that when I read more, I become more intuitive with words. My vocabulary becomes a lot bigger. I'm stretched. So when you read more, you stretch your vocabulary. I have an old Webster's dictionary down here, which I find very helpful, because that's for writers. Get you an old hardback dictionary and stop Googling your definitions. Find it in the book, because it is different, right? It is very different. So I find that when I read a whole lot more, my vocabulary gets stretched. And for me, as we're in this dissertation writing phase, it's very helpful too.
Well, it's really phenomenal. The woman who spoke before you, she talked about this term virago, which is a word I never heard of. And it had to do with like, it's kind of seen as negative now, but it's actually really used to be a positive about like these really strong, kind of outspoken women. And so now when I hear it, I'm like, virago, I want to be a virago, right? And so it's really kind of about changing the narrative. And, like you said, that's one word now that's been added to my vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the more precise words we can have, the better we can communicate. And so much of what you've talked about in the two books that you have and the next book that you're writing, it's all about our ability to connect. It's all about our ability to communicate with each other.
Absolutely. I don't have any birth children of my own, right? But I have lots of young people that I've mentored and spoken with. My sisters, they have children. So I'm always thinking about what can I leave for the next generation of children, right? And for me, it has been the writing. It has been the ability to research and develop this voice. So some of my favorite authors, which I know you know them, Maya Angelou was one of my favorite authors, and Zora Neale Hurston. She was a controversial writer back in the day. Now to get anything that's Zora Neale Hurston, everybody's like eating it up. So it's been always my desire to have that same tenacity that those women had in their writing, from being extremely creative to structured. Zora Neale Hurston was very creative in her writing, but then she had this structured formality towards the more mature years of her life. So I think it's worth the try, and it's a part for me. Again, what can I leave in the earth for the next generation?
Kaija, you have had just so many great points throughout this, and I just feel honored that you were here today. And as we're getting ready to wrap up your segment, has there been anything that I haven't asked you that you want to talk about, or any just kind of like last leadership nuggets, pieces of wisdom that you want to share with the viewers now, or those who are going to watch this in a recording?
Yay. That's really interesting. One, if I could give a soft plug to my site, my website, leadershipnuggets.org. That's where I produce a lot of my leadership nuggets, and that's where you can also find my t-shirts. I've kind of designed about maybe 4 or 5 different t-shirts out there now, with this creative leadership being one. It's a website where my thoughts is creating t-shirts for the leaders in mind, really thinking about leaders, leaders, leaders. And then also, I think it's important to highlight for leaders and your audience of authors is don't be afraid, right? Don't be afraid to try what it is. If you wake up in the morning thinking about doing the same thing that you didn't do yesterday or last week or last month, more than likely that's a reminder that that's what you should be doing. Now that's a good nugget right there. I hope you recorded that one. I got to remember that.
It's on your recording now.
Yes, yes. And reason being is because oftentimes I think you might be experiencing this. I'm going through this now with my professional career. Sometimes we force things into a box about ourselves and what we should do or should be doing, and we don't explore the unique creative side of who we are. We don't explore the artist in us, the dancer in us, the mechanic in us, the gardener in us, and the musician in us. And I think every human being has something creative that they were born with that they should be doing. And as authors, I think it's very important that we, wake up in the morning really being intentional about the things that we know we should be doing, but we're sacrificing it for the things that we think we need to be doing. So I think within that perspective, that's what I would like to leave with your audience.
You just bring up so many great points in that. I mean, first of all, about embracing the creativity, embracing the facts that sometimes people tell us what we should do, and what we should do and what we need to do are 2 different things. And we have to listen to that intuition. And most importantly, as we all go through this journey, there's no one right way. And Kaija, I just really want to thank you so much for being here and for spending this time with me today.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you. I feel honored to be amongst.
No, it's my pleasure.